Nielsen IAG, responsible for consumer packaged goods. And he's here with us today. Randall, welcome to Digital Life.
Shelly, thank you.
Well, it's great to see you. So, does advertising really work?
Well, Shelly, I think there are two big urban myths in the marketing world today. The first is that people are watching less TV than they watched in the past, and that's simply not true.
Right, they're watching a lot more TV.
Absolutely, yeah. Absolutely. The second thing, though, is that TV advertising is somehow less effective than it was before. What we actually know is that TV advertising is about as effective as it's ever been. Two things. First of all, we know from single source data, where we look at the single variable impact of advertising, that advertising is about as effective now as it was 10 years ago. On average, about $1 invested in advertising yields about a 10-cent return, and that's been pretty steady over time. The second thing, at Nielsen IAG, we measure all kinds of ad metrics: awareness, ad recall, likability, and those metrics are pretty constant over the last 5 years.
So, Randall, and believe me, I know the data that you're speaking of, and I respect it a lot. People are watching more TV than ever before, but they're watching it on other channels. They're watching it not where they used to watch it, not in a concentrated way. And so it's ever more difficult to get scale and to basically get everybody to think the same way and do the same thing. Tell me a little bit about how that's manifesting itself. I understand the data on a big average says TV is more effective and people are watching more TV, but it's just harder now. The business is just harder.
I think it is harder, and I think that one of the areas of innovation in TV advertising going forward is going to be around the effective context, and that is finding programs that actually have high TV program engagement, where viewers are more engaged in the program, which our research tells us if they're more engaged in the program, they tend to be much more likely to remember your ad. You're
the perfect guy to ask this question. Mm-hmm. Nielsen's been a currency for so many years, the currency of rating points, gross rating points, demographics, and people use Nielsen ratings and share to price their advertising. And yet engagement is a concept, it's not a currency. So to hear you talk, from Nielsen about engagement, how do you define that? How is engagement defined in the Nielsen world?
Sure, we actually have a syndicated panel where we measure every program on TV every day for about 70% of the viewing audience. And we ask consumers a series of 5 to 10 questions per program to find out how much they really remember about what they're watching. And so we score every program on a scale of 0 to 100 on an engagement score, and then we can correlate those scores with ad recall and ad effectiveness. And we know there's a very strong correlation between the two. So the key here would be, I think TV ratings will continue to be the currency, and what we need to do is think about TV program engagement in addition to that currency.
So what happens? Just take me through the process. I've got my rating, I've got my demographic, I know how many physical people are spending time with the show. Now we add this new concept, engagement. How much do they really pay attention to what it is they're watching?
Yep.
If I'm an advertiser, I think I'd like to know that. If I'm a media person and I'm selling the media, can I charge more for a show where people are more engaged?
Absolutely.
And how does that work?
First of all, we sell this data to almost every major network. So the networks are also measuring program engagement. They have an understanding of that. So let's just take an example. If you look at Hulu, what our advertising research would say is that the same ad on Hulu is going to be more effective than the same ad on a network, generally speaking, right? So if you're the CEO of Hulu, you're going to say, hey, I can charge more for this because the program engagement is higher.
That is fantastic news. Randall, I think this is something that needs to be discussed a lot more and better understood by people in the advertising industry. But thank you so much for being here with us today and putting a little bit of light on a tough problem. This is Randall Veard from Nielsen IAG. You're watching Digital Life. We'll be right back. The microwave was invented after a researcher walked by a radar tube and a chocolate bar melted in his pocket. Want to make your tweets more useful? Well, if they wanted to reach you with a brand message, all they had to do was buy some television commercials. But now, you're spending your free time on the web with your iPhones, video gaming, tweeting, watching online video on YouTube or Hulu. You are, unfortunately for most advertisers, a moving target. If you read the trades, you hear everything from agencies are dead to broadcasters are dead. Well, obviously reports of their demise have been somewhat overstated, but consumers behaving the way they want to behave has become a very big problem for the industry. Are there answers? first we have to figure out some smart questions. And to do that, I've asked my friend Rob Norman for help. The Group M is the world's largest buyer of advertising media with billings of $80 billion. And Rob is not only a member of their global executive committee, he's also CEO of Group M Interaction Worldwide, the world's largest buyer of online media with 2008 billings of approximately $6 billion. So Rob's especially qualified to help us out. Welcome, Rob.
Hey, Shelly. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you, too. So, is the agency business really dead?
Well, it's funny, we're having this conversation a couple of weeks ahead of the February the 7th, which is like the Academy Awards for the advertising business. And we call it the Super Bowl, right? And in that, the advertising is almost as much talked about as the game itself, certainly in a number of circles. We have the USA Today poll afterwards. And one of the things that's most interesting about the Super Bowl now is one of the ways we measure the success of those commercials is where they pop up on YouTube and how they get tweeted and retweeted and where they appear on Facebook profiles and how we're relying more and more on consumers to pass on those messages to build the visibility of advertising. And advertising still remains super valuable. Now, what's clear to us and clear to all of our clients is that we've got so many fewer opportunities to reach massive amounts of people all at once, and that whole idea of water cooler television isn't what it used to be. Now, what that means to us is we have to be more creative. I mean, we can carry on beating people over the head more and more, but ultimately we need to be more creative, and we need to put advertising into the social landscape as well as into the broadcast landscape.
I understand that social media has had a huge impact, and obviously YouTube and Hulu have had a fairly significant impact on the agency business. The question is, and I know advertising is alive and thriving, how is the agency business doing? Where does the agency fit into all this?
Well, so you know we've got millions more channels than we used to have. We've got loads more formats of different kinds of advertising, from short form to long form to applications as well as ads. Now, all of those have a kind of manufacturing aspect to them. Someone has to produce all of that material. Sure, the consumer produces a bit of it in this whole world of user-generated content, but it's really the agency world that's manifesting a huge change to perform more and more different pieces of production function now. And in the media side of the world, the distribution piece, which is where I'm involved, we have many, many more data points, many more channels to distribute in. So the agency world is really kind of busier than it's ever been right now.
What's really fun about the business now? I know what's hard about the business. What's really fun about the advertising business?
Well, what's great about the advertising business now is instant effect. There was a time we used to make ads and we used to do things called tracking studies, and months later we'd look at them and there'd be a small needle point on a graph that said awareness went up a little bit, consumer preference went up a little bit. We now have an instant ballot in the court of public opinion, and we see that both in the terms of pass along and how many people use things online. We have conversation monitoring that allows us to understand how people talk about brands. And of course, for many of our clients, we've got e-commerce. We're connecting advertising directly to sales, there and then, live and in real time. That's super exciting when the results are in right now.
Well, obviously, they're not in the business of buying advertising. All of your clients are in the business of selling what it is they sell. So I'm sure they're much happier if you can measure performance or if they actually come up with an extra sale.
Yeah, and I think that's the key point. We do advertising two things. We try and put brands into a kind of socially relevant context. We like people to know what things do. We like them to know what they are. We like them to remember them. We like them to keep some of that communication and pass it on to other things. But you can't get away from the motive for doing it, because in the end, what we're trying to do is build volume, build market share, and that in turn creates profits, jobs, and all of the other things that American manufacturing and American business needs.
Wow, that's deep. Okay, Super Bowl's coming up. Who wins?
E-Trade.
Of course they do.
With a 1-yard run in the fourth quarter.
Rob Norman, thank you so very much for being here. Rob Norman, who is the CEO of Group M Interaction, the world's largest online media buying agency. I'm Shelly Palmer. You're watching Digital Life. Does advertising really work? It may sound like a strange question, but Randall Beard may have